Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Library of the Weird. Today, I have another short story collection review, and although it's getting warmer outside, it's still January, and we had 12 degrees Celsius outside today, which is really warm. I thought it would be great if I had another short story collection that fits the winter theme. It's not even halfway through winter yet. This short story collection is called Taaqtumi, an anthology of Arctic horror stories. And I'm super sorry if my pronunciation is off. There are a lot of Inuktitut words in here, which is, I think, the language of the Inuit. Taaqtumi is one of them, meaning darkness. There is a pronunciation guide in here, but I mean, I am no expert, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry if I pronounce some words wrong. I do my best. This anthology was compiled by Neil Christopher and it was released in 2019. It was released by Inhabit Media, which is the first Inuit-owned independent publishing company in the Canadian Arctic. They say that about themselves. They publish a lot of Inuit and Northern authors, and they even support research into Inuit mythology and culture. So you should really check them out. This book contains 9 short stories by different authors. There are a few kind of famous authors in here. One of them is Aviak Johnston, and there's Richard Van Camp and Gail Kabluna, and some others in here. Some of the authors are pretty well known and have released kind of major works. Aviak Johnston, for example, won several awards, including the Indigenous Voices Award for her YA fantasy novel, Those Who Run in the Sky. Richard Van Camp has published novels, short story collections, and even graphic novels. His book, The Lesser Blessed, was even adapted to a movie in 2012. So we really do have some achieved writers in here. The stories all take place somewhere in the Canadian Arctic and often feature Inuit protagonists, which means that through these books we do not only get horror stories, but we also see through the lens of Inuit or Northern Canadian authors, and we kind of learn a bit about Inuit culture, for example, and there's even one story which just name drops the Canadian residential system or Canadian boarding school system, which is more horrible than all the stories in here combined. And if you don't know about it, please really check it out, because it's important that people learn about stuff like this. Yeah, what are the stories actually about? Most of the stories feature some kind of magical realism. So most of the time we have very, very realistic settings with just a bit surrealism or magic or fantasy like sprinkled in. While most stories in here are set in the now, there are some stories which are definitely set in the future. We have some post-apocalyptic stories. So there's just a huge there are many different themes in this book. So the first story I want to talk about is actually the first story in this book. I try my best at pronouncing it right. I'm looking up here. I'm looking it up here in the pronunciation guide. So in Inuktitut, it's called Ixinaktuk Talik Piktuk, which kind of means something like Haunted Blizzard. It's written by Aviak Johnston, and it's one of the shorter stories in this anthology. It's only 10 pages long, and it starts with a very, very realistic setting, and then changes to something which you probably know from campfire stories as a child or something like that. At the start of the story, school is cancelled because of a blizzard, and at least people who grew up I grew up in northern Germany, and probably people in the US and whatnot know this. When the weather is bad, school gets cancelled. That's like the typical situation. It's a typical situation in winter, and I can only guess that in northern Canada it has to be really, really bad when there's a blizzard coming. Our protagonist is going home, and he has a call with her mom, and they're just talking about, school gets cancelled, I'm going home. And when she gets home, or even on the way home, she notices that something is not quite right. And I don't really want to say more about it because I don't want to spoil a 10-page long story. It sets up really nicely. It's a good first story because it really sets up the others for the other stories in this anthology, because like I said in the beginning, you see a lot of this blending of a very, very realistic setting with something surreal. The story is beautifully written. I think you directly you instantly notice why Aviak Johnston won an award for one of her novels, because I really like the prose. It has a great pacing. I mean, it's 10 pages long. What can I say about it? It's really exciting, and we get a lot of Inuktitut phrases. As someone who started reading English novels when his English was kind of meh, I had no problems with words I don't understand. Most of the time you get through context what the words mean, or you just look them up in the glossary. So I don't think that's really a bad thing. And a few new words or phrases, which is kind of nice anyway. The next story I want to talk about is called Utiktuk, which means something like returning or going back, according to the glossary. And it was written by Gail Kabluna. It takes place in the middle of nowhere on the western shore of Baffin Island. Baffin Island is located in northern Canada. I think you can look it up if you want to know. And it's kind of important that it's in the middle of nowhere, because in the story we learn that there was a huge pandemic, and there was a virus or something that turned humans into something like zombies. There's also an Inuktitut word for zombies, which you can use, which is used interchangeably. Iyiroyak. Iyiroyak. Something like that. At the beginning of the story, we meet our main character, who is called Eliza, who is 12 years old. She will be turning 13 soon. She shoots a zombie with a rifle. I mean, it just have you start the story and you meet this character, 12-year-old girl, who's waiting in the snow. She has her rifle with her, and then there's a zombie. So I was instantly hooked on this story. And We are told that she escaped to this place with an elderly man and a 5-year-old boy. The elderly man, who's called Ituk, provides for them mostly, and yeah, they have lived the last 3 years together. And one day, a helicopter arrives with a doctor and another person. The doctor tells them that there's now an antidote, and the Canadian government orders all people to go back to civilization and get the antidote. Yeah, this is where I will stop with my explanation, because there are some exciting, gruesome things happening next. I mean, this story was also really well written, but what I personally liked most about this story is when the doctor, comes out of the helicopter, tells the people what's going on, and says, "I want to take you all with me." The elderly man, Ituk, he says, I don't want to go. And he mentions the Canadian boarding schools, and I think this kind of symbolizes many native people, be it First Nations, Native Americans, or other indigenous people around the world who have suffered under the government or state authorities, and have kind of a huge mistrust for everything that comes from the government. I mean, I can't really speak on this because obviously I'm a privileged white guy from Europe, but I found this really thought-provoking. Yeah, I really did like the story. And the last story I want to talk about is actually the last story in this book. It's called Strays and was written by Remo Kempt. It tells the story of a veterinarian who, together with her technician, it's called a small hamlet in the center of Baffin Island. And they are there to look after the dogs there. They're living in a hotel, and then again, we are in the Arctic. There's a blizzard coming. This blizzard really adds to the atmosphere. While reading the story, I had a very eerie feeling. Most of the story takes place at night, where our main character, the veterinarian, hears weird sounds. She can't sleep, and yeah, we find out that she has a pretty dark secret, and there's a turn of events that you don't really expect, and I really like that about the story. So this were 3 stories out of the 9 of this book. I don't think I have spoiled too much for you. If I did, I'm really, really sorry. But overall, I wanted to say that I really enjoyed this anthology. I mean, it's really short. It's 170 pages long. You can do it in 1, 2, or 3 days if you read enough. There was basically no story I disliked. There were some which didn't really hit home, but they were okay as well. Like I said, I didn't have any problems with the words I didn't know. I was really impressed with the storytelling, and each story had different themes, and the stories felt really, really unique. The book also features some great artwork. I think I haven't really shown you the cover. I don't know how much you see of it. Yeah, there's like a raven or a crow up front, and this is something that you see all over the novel. There are a lot of feathers and wings. Each story starts with kind of this opening page, where you have some quite nice artwork as well. Then I really like that they have a pronunciation guide, and there's also info on all the authors in here. So overall, I really, really did enjoy this anthology. I hope I brought that across and that you want to enjoy the stories too. I think it's not much. Here it's $16.95. I don't know how much I have paid in euros, but with every purchase you support the Inuit people. Actually, the Inhabit Media does research for the government as well, I believe. So yeah, you do a lot of good with purchasing this anthology. And with this, I want to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed my review. If so, let me know. If you have any comments, critique, let me know as well. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.